I am Dave the Amateur Magus. On this channel I talk all about the mechanics behind ceremonial magic, occultism, esotericism, and the mechanics behind everything you can find within a dusty old grimoire. If you enjoy what I do here and you want to support the channel, link in the description of the Patreon, where you can get exclusive access to videos early, Patreon exclusive content like videos and the Occultic Manual series, which I aim at being more instructional than what I have here on the channel, but less unapproachable than some of the old grimoires I like to talk about on the channel. If any of that sounds of interest to you, link in the description, and if you are already supporting me on Patreon, you have my thanks for your continued and ongoing support. Hope to see you all there. Recently, there has been a upsurge in the discussion about banishing, and so I kind of wanted to explain that from my perspective and kind of explain why everyone is kind of right about the banishing topic in and of themselves to some degree, but the issue is that we are trying to have a very simple conversation about a very nuanced topic. So let's get into that, shall we? Now, when I say banishing, what I mean here is banishing spiritual forces. And for those of you who are using the psych paradigm, you are deactivating a particular psychological principle if you are invoking it. But for the rest of us who actually believe in spirits and our spirituality, we're going to be invoking spirits, calling spirits up, and then sending them off. This is banishing, the sending them off part. Now, when we are doing the banishing, there is a lot of debate about when you should banish, should you banish, how much you should banish, and so let's talk a little bit about that, shall we? You don't need to banish everything all the time. You don't. You genuinely don't need to banish certain things, and a lot of things you really can't banish. So when you get into more advanced magic, you will get things like familiar spirits. Familiar spirits are kind of immune implicitly from your magical banishings unless you are sending them off to go do something. Familiar spirits are, by and large, not going to be affected by your banishing spells. Now, the main reason why people say that you shouldn't banish is, or shouldn't banish as often, I should say, is because of a couple of reasons. One, in a lot of earlier books, in post-Golden Dawn style occult books, this is, if I remember correctly, particularly prevalent in Donald Tyson's work. You will find a lot of magicians overemphasizing banishing. It becomes kind of banish, 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 banish. And this stuck in the minds of a lot of beginner occultists for a long time, to the point where we now have a lot of people saying, no, you shouldn't banish nearly as much as people seem to give it credit for. So let's take a moment and go on a case-by-case basis of when you should banish. I'm calling up the angels of the quarters from the Lesser Banishing Ritual, the Pentagram. Do I need to forcibly banish those? You call those up for your banishing rituals anyways, so it's probably a bad idea. So you don't need to really banish those. Now, I'm calling up elemental forces in this next example. Should I banish those? Well, there is actually a large, well-documented amount of magical issues with not banishing elemental forces, so you should probably try to banish those. I'm calling up demonic forces. Well, you definitely don't want the demons of destruction to remain in your house, or you don't want other various infernal spirits just kind of lingering around, so you should probably banish those as well. What does that leave us for what we aren't banishing? Well, this kind of leaves us for we are not banishing objectively beneficial spirits and spirits that we kind of have given the ability to reside in a similar space to us. This is going to be familiar spirits. This is going to be angelic spirits. Ideally, angels usually have things to do. Now, I want to answer a very important question because I've seen two takes on this mostly, and they come from two different sides of a well-meaning argument. Now, one of the arguments I've heard about recently is that you should not banish because, unless you are dealing with malevolent forces like demons, as I mentioned before, you shouldn't banish because that increases the thickness between you and the spirits, because you banishing them thickens the veil between you and them and makes it more difficult for them to interact with you directly. And I'm just going to say straight up that yes, this is entirely the point of banishing. The reason why this is because you are trying to get You are trying to return to the mundane world. You are trying to raise your mind up to the heavens, in the case of, divine planetary magic primarily. You're trying to look up to the divine, and you are trying to beseech the divine, and then you banish to cut that off, so you are, lessening your connection. You can't permanently get rid of your connection, but you are lessening the ability for it to influence you, because if you don't, and you have invoked, say, Mars, you're going to have a problem where suddenly, if that spills out into your everyday life, suddenly you have become a walking conduit in order to make everyone around you angry. This is, of course, a hyperbolic situation, but, we have to kind of go with the worst case scenario here. Another example is if you are calling up the angels, right? You usually send them off instead of, hardcore banishing, and the reason why is because those are messengers of God. You are trying to make it so it's easier for you to work with them in the future. In fact, if you look at the old grimoires, a lot of the old grimoires, when you are sending off spirits, part of the license to depart, as it was called, is be ready to come when I call you again. Okay? So you are sending the spirits off with the implication that you are going to call them up again in the future, and you want them to be ready to come when they are called next time. But you don't want the spirits to be there all the time, because, you have to do mundane things, and if the spirit of Jupiter is in your ear 24/7 when you're trying to, work out or do various different things, it's going to whisper things in your ear. For the example of if you're working out, the spirit of Jupiter might tell you to go even further beyond what you're reasonably capable of doing. So, and when I say that, it's like, just keep adding weights despite the fact that your arms are tired. That kind of thing. This is why we banish the spirits, so that we can do the mundane work that we need to do in the regular mundane world. Now, the other thing that I've seen is that you shouldn't banish spirits because the spirits think it's mean. I typically, whenever I see this, it is from people saying that you shouldn't banish demons because demons think it's mean and you should just let the demons run amok, which is the equivalent of, oh no, you're hindering your child's creativity if you don't let them draw on the fucking walls. I think that this is genuinely a terrible take, because it kind of gives too much credit and is kind of a naive take for a lot of spirits. I mean, there are malicious spirits out there, and not banishing them just because it might hurt their feelings is really stupid. I mean, yes, some of the spirits aren't going to like you banishing them. However, that's not a problem, because you're banishing the spirits in order to keep them from setting your house on fire, metaphorically. Typically, when it comes to banishing spirits that would be pissed off about you banishing them, you're typically going to be doing this in the form of an exorcism, so you wouldn't really care that you're doing the exorcism. You're not really going to be caring about the spirits that you're trying to kick out, because you're going to be doing that regardless. The charitable view of this opinion is that you banishing the spirits is kind of damaging your reputation with the spirit. But even in the old grimoires, the method for banishing the spirits is you send them off with the license to depart, then you do your banishings. So that's why it's not a big deal. You're sending them out before you kind of shove them out the airlock, so to speak. So I personally don't think that's a good idea. I personally don't think that's a good reason for not banishing. Now, is there a kind of excessive amount of banishing you can do? Oh, absolutely. If you banish too much, it can cause negative psychological effects, because after a certain point, nature does abhor a vacuum. You know, you can think about it like if you are doing a lot of banishings, what it does is it starts to create a vacuum chamber in your magical space. So if you banish, you banish, you banish, and then you invoke something, whatever you're invoking is going to fill your space more powerfully compared to if you were just invoking. This is part of the reason why the Golden Dawn style of magic, you will see people begin with the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, and then an elemental invocation. It is because they're trying to push all of the unwanted elemental force out so they can invoke the force that they are trying to invoke in a more powerful way. Now, this is not entirely accurate, because if you are doing the invoking ritual of the pentagram, you're banishing. You know, you could make the argument that if you're doing the lesser invoking ritual of the pentagram, you are invoking the powers that you are wanting to anyways, so you're double invoking in that case. But that is a mechanical discussion for another time. So yeah, in summary, you need to banish because while it does cause the spirits to be more distant from you, that's the entire point. And if you're doing proper banishing, it won't damage your relationship with the spirits you're trying to work with, and if anything, it will improve them because they're not constantly around you and you're not constantly getting sick of them. So yeah, hopefully everyone is having a good day. If you're not having a good day, I hope your day gets better. Take it easy, take care, and I will see you next time.